As much as we enjoy how grounded in reality a lot of Tarkov's elements actually are, I always appreciate it when BSG makes changes that help gamify Tarkov just a little bit more. I stopped using the words realism and realistic to describe Tarkov a long time ago, because people seem to get into a tizzy about what parts are and are not actually realistic. Immersive is a better adjective in most cases, but at the end of the day, Tarkov is just a video game, and we play games to have fun, hopefully. So, whenever things do get shifted around so it feels more like a video game, it makes me happy, even if it means sacrificing some of those more immersive and potentially realistic moments. One such change was the addition of enchantments that could be added to both weapons and armors when repaired. The initial sound of the idea was awesome. We can make our weapons and armor have a chance at a random buff. That's super dope. Unfortunately, when it was added to the game, it came with a bunch of caveats that ultimately made it so that many players of Tarkov can't, or honestly won't, even interact with this mechanic. All of these things in the game that really do disappoint me because it had the potential to be interesting and robust, allowing for even more modularity to the weapons in the game and really help define them as our own. But alas, it was a typical BSG lateral move to add something cool but make it so obnoxious to get your hands on that many people won't even acknowledge its existence. Unfortunately, and ultimately, enchantments are an awesome addition to the game, but their implementation was awful. Now, before we go into why enchantments suck, we should probably quickly go over how they work. Armor and weapons can be enchanted, and with the right repair kits and a high enough weapon maintenance skill, and either light or heavy skill depending on the armor, being 10 for all of those skills, there is a low percent chance for a random buff to be added to the item in question. For armor, it mainly reduces the amount of incoming damage the armor itself takes, meaning it will last longer and take less to repair, meaning it's simply more efficient at what it does. Weapons are a little more interesting, having multiple different buffs that are cool, but have little to no real impact on your performance. Decreased weapon spread and malfunction chance are situationally useful, with spread obviously being the better of the two. Malfunctions only occur when weapons are below 93% durability, and I can't remember the last time I was able to use the same weapon for so long that it dips below that threshold. I usually die and just end up buying another gun. It's useful for the scav, raider, rogue, and boss weapon, but again, depending on what they have, something like an N4 can have its lower receiver swapped for a brand new one, which kind of removes the possibility of ever having a malfunction because as soon as you cross below 93%, you buy a new fresh receiver and you're all set. Now, not every gun has that luxury, but this is one of those wrinkles that comes in with this game mechanic right off the bat. Now, on paper, all of this sounds like exactly what you would be looking for, but this is where the first problem really rears its ugly head. Again, you only get the chance to see an enchantment at level 10 of that skill, so it already takes way too long to see the fruits of your labor. And yes, you can power farm these skills by getting your hands on cheap armor and weapons from Fence, repairing them, and then immediately selling them back. But that's just an objective waste of your precious rubles that could just go to affording better kits. It's also a really lame way of having to farm the skill if you even want to engage with it. And even if you do manage to hit level 10 with any of the skills, the percent chance to see a buff on your armor is a paltry 2% between skill levels 10 and 14. It's abysmal. If we want to use percentages that low, then the ability to start seeing buffs should be lowered to having the skill at maybe like level 5. That way, the curve feels more justified for how rarely you're going to see a buff on these items. Obviously, we don't want any of these values to be easy to obtain, but like, come on. Anything would be better than what we currently have. Weapons, depending on the buff, can be anywhere from 3 to 5% at level 10, and both of the skills scale linearly up to a max level of 51 for the skill. And even at max skills, no buff has a chance higher than 30%. A 1 in 3 odds is still pretty good and better than nothing, but who in the right mind is ever going to hit elite level skills for any of these? It's ludicrous to have chances that can become relatively consistent take so damn long. What makes these low values hurt even more is that if you do get lucky and get a buff on any kind of your weapons or armor, the moment you try and repair that item again, you lose the buff. Out of all the problems with this mechanic, this single-handedly might be the dumbest one of them all. If a weapon gets a buff, you are now locked out from repairing that gun or armor, otherwise you forfeit the buff. If you have a slick armor, level 6, super powerful armor steel, so it repairs really well, you can get a lot of raids out of it if you stay alive. If that gets a buff and then gets zeroed the next raid, you either can't use that armor again, or you repair it and say goodbye to your buff. It baffles my brain that BSG would make something so rare, so hard to get, and yet so easily disposable. And if you lack that critical information, it's just going to frustrate you to the point where you won't even bother with the enchantment mechanic ever again, and rightfully so. I think it's so cool, and yet I have had maybe in my possession a single weapon with a buff, and maybe one armor with a buff since they've introduced this entire mechanic into the game. This whole thing feels like a failure because BSG hasn't added any other buffs to either armor or weapons since it was introduced. I feel as though they might be afraid to really allow people to use this mechanic in its entirety. Wouldn't it be cool if enchantments worked in the same way, similarly to Minecraft, where you don't have the choice to get exactly what you want, but there are ways of having an idea of what you might get? But of course, something like this in Tarkov would only make sense if there were more buffs that could be acquired. And I think there is another major sticking point for myself personally as to why I detest this entire system so much. There is no variety with what you can get on your gear. Where's your reload speed buff? I know there are skills that already do this, but unless you put 2,500 raids into a single wipe, you're not going to feel the benefits of these. That's just the reality of the situation. Or allowing armor to be repaired even better regardless of what material it's made out of. Materials like ceramic and combined materials become much more valuable, so armors like the Gazelle and AVS are much more enticing and doesn't reduce their use to a one-time Andy. Ideas like this might be busted and broken, and I know the only buff that BSG would never add is a damage buff, which is fine, I agree with that. But let's get crazy with this system, guys, come on. You added something that is genuinely awesome and really gamifies Tarkov in a positive way, and yet they have not capitalized on it at all. Which is a damn shame, because it would be so fun taking weapons and armors into a workbench and tuning and tweaking them to try and get the buffs that you value the most. I know that's not how it works currently, but it should. A sub-menu of the workbench that allows you to buff your gear using extremely rare and expensive materials would be so cool. You can't use the item once you start the process, and it takes a really long time, and you don't lose the damn buff when you repair the item. Just some of the simple additions to enchantments could easily make it the most interesting and deep mechanic in Tarkov that isn't revolved around just shooting and learning recoil of guns. Enchantments was Tarkov's opportunity to really have a mechanic in the game that doesn't care about realism, immersion, or anything of the sort, but instead have a deep and complex side game that allows further customization of your gear in a way that you really want. And to think, I know it's been put on the back burner for BSG while they add more critical mechanics, but imagine the customizable rig system on top of crafting your own buffs. Imagine that. Oh my god, that alone would add so much life to the game of Tarkov. You kill a PMC, and you get to see what they were running for a modded armored rig and whatever buffs they value. And if we wanted to take it a step further, create a new station in the hideout in the same room as the gym that we can make that specifically focus on enchantments. It doesn't even have to be the workbench. Oh, the possibilities are endless here. But I need to come back down to reality and be reminded that most of this will never happen, sadly. But it's still fun to imagine. But it always hurts to do so with anything fun regarding Tarkov. Either way, enchantments are, unfortunately, a shadow of what they could be. And it makes me both frustrated and sad, because I want something like this in the game and have the time to put into it so players spend time, money, resources into this as well. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. What are your thoughts on enchantments and the entire system currently in the game? Be sure to leave your thoughts down below and subscribe for more videos about theorizing additional ideas on mechanics in the game that may be lacking that could be so much cooler. I hope to see you in future ones.